Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Dane, your host. I hope that you're doing great wherever you may find yourselves, and blessings to all of you wonderful people out there. Quite a long time ago now, I want to say year and a half or longer, I did a video where I talked about how, for the most part, there are exceptions of course, where people who listen to punk tend to not like progressive rock and vice versa. Today is not a rehashing of the same topic, but there are a couple things that I'm going to mention that reflect back to that video. But today's video is to discuss my defense of progressive rock. So this video is a video essay on a defense of progressive rock, criticizing the critics of progressive rock. And to be clear, so we're on the same page, when I use the word critic or critics, I mean those who are journalists, professional critics, that sort of thing, but also fans who criticize progressive rock. Now, before I continue and get started, really, let me say that I totally believe that taste in music is 100% subjective. I've talked about that many times on this channel. I have 2 videos where I talk about that, and some other places here and there in little minor spurts. But this video is to talk about what I think is the implied or apparent hypocrisy when it comes to fans of music that isn't progressive rock, in the rock umbrella, if you will, all the different subgenres that go with that. So they don't like progressive rock, but much or some of the music they like to has some of the same elements that share what goes on in progressive rock and that sort of thing. So that's what I'm really focusing on today. And like I said, a couple of things will harken back to that video. So let's go ahead and get started. There are 9 different complaints or criticism of progressive rock that non-progressive rock fans have. And it's not just those in the punk rock camp, but many of those are in that camp, as I said. So the first one is time signature changes. That is a big criticism, not liking times, not caring for time signature changes. I think I did a video, or I'm about to do another video, where I talk about that criticism. But essentially, this is a brief one here. Many complain that people or bands and artists who do time signature changes just do it to do it. That is totally not true. It's part of one of the things that makes up progressive rock. So, for example, that's like saying doing a film noir movie and not having symbolism through the light and shade, like in Casablanca, the blinds that cover the windows in the shadows and the light that is seen casting on the walls and on the characters is meant to demonstrate that Elsa and Rick are in a prison of their own making, and by the making of the others, especially the Nazis in that movie. Think of if you're a punk rock fan, one of the elements of that is very minimalistic approach to music for the most part, with not of technical skill, although there is some of that, but again, a minimalist approach to the music, that kind of thing. Not very much in the way, if any, really cerebral lyrics, although you have that as well. It depends on the band, but in overall sense, much different from progressive rock. So time signature changes are so elementary to progressive rock, as is long-winded epic type tracks, and there are of course other elements that make up progressive rock. Time signature changes are something I just think are wonderful. And the reason for that is it sends the piece off in a new direction. It sends you on a journey. It gives you a different mode, a different mood, a different tone. There's elements of light and shade and everything in between. And that's why time signature changes are so important. Taking things to a new level, a new oomph, if you will. Maybe becoming more aggressive or less aggressive. All kind of wonderful things. Thank goodness for time signature changes. So it's not just to do it. It has a purpose. It has a meaning. It's part of the music, as I said. All right, next is critics of prog do not like long solos. Well, I'm sure there are a lot of anti-progressive rock fans out there who love classical and Baroque music. Example, Paganini. You have some wonderful long solos from that. I'm sure there's a ton of jazz and jazz fusion folks out there who don't like prog rock, but they like the long solos there. So again, that's part of the hypocrisy. The first example was not the hypocrisy, but just not understanding that that's an element of the genre or subgenre. I'm sure there are a lot of people who like Skinner's Freebird, Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven, Rock Bottom's the song Rock Bottom from UFO, not the Kiss version, Pink Floyd's Comfortably Numb, Van Halen's Eruption, the Eagles' Hotel California, Derek and the Dominoes' Layla, Little Wing from Stevie Ray Vaughan, Sweet Child of Mine from Guns N' Roses. Other examples are Ritchie Blackmore in his entire career. Any improvisation, whether it's King Crimson, Deep Purple, you name it, it's part of what makes progressive rock, although Deep Purple is not progressive rock. What I was trying to say is those songs that I just mentioned, Eruption, Comfortably Numb, Rock Bottom, etc., the music of Deep Purple, Yngwie Malmsteen, think of all the guitarists in the Shrapnel Records age, Tony McAlpine, Jason Becker, Vinnie Moore, David T. Chastain, Joe Satriani, Eric Johnson, Michael Fath, etc. If you're a lover of those, you have long-winded solos, so why is it different when it comes to progressive rock? Okay, the next criticism of progressive rock is overlong albums. Here's another example of hypocrisy. I'm sure there's a ton of people who don't like progressive rock, but you have them liking the following overlong albums: Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti, the White Album from the Beatles, Quadrophenia and Tommy from The Who, Electric Ladyland from Hendrix, Chicago 1, 2, and 3 and Beyond, Kiss Alive albums in general, Yes Songs from Yes, of course, is one of the quintessential prog rock albums. Allman Brothers, Eat a Peach comes to mind, Blood on the Tracks from Bob Dylan, The Wall from Pink Floyd, All Things Must Pass, a 3 CD or 3 vinyl record set. Zen Arcade from Husker Du, that's a punk band. That's a double album. Eat It from Humble Pie. So part of the hypocrisy is it's bad to have overlong albums when it comes to progressive rock, but when it comes to punk, it's okay. Zen Arcade again, but here's an even bigger hypocrisy. London Calling, a double album, and Sandinista, a triple album from the punk band The Clash. So, okay. Next is fantasy lyrics. Those who don't like progressive rock complain about the fantasy lyrics. Well, here's my take on that. If all rock music was party music, partying, getting lucky, drinking, smoking, gambling, whoring, combination thereof, dancing, mentioning rock and roll, the word rocking, hitting the road, bye, I'm not going to see you again, one night stand kind of thing, rock and roll would be pretty limited. So yes, many of us like, and I'm not saying that you have to like, and again, music is 100% subjective, of course, but if you don't like fantasy lyrics, and fantasy themed based, great. But I'm sure there are people out there who don't like progressive rock, but they like fantasy based movies. So again, I'm not seeing, again, the implied or potential or apparent hypocrisy is the order of the day. Ronnie James Dio, Uriah Heep, a lot of power metal and metal bands have fantasy-based lyrics, so it's okay in metal and hard rock, but not in progressive rock, is what you're saying, or some might be saying. Next, another complaint is grandiose stage sets / costumes, the idea that less is more, in other words. I got to turn on my phone, I just realized, because there's a note I want to read. Okay, here we go. All right, so in a minute. So again, grandiose stage sets, costumes are a bad thing for those who don't like it in music. That's their complaint again for not liking. One of the reasons why they don't like progressive rock, because of their less is more approach, not just with the music, because they don't like the length and that sort of thing, but they don't want all these theatrical stuff. And I've gone on record many times. I have a playlist called It's the Music That Matters Most, and I'll be the first to tell you that's totally true. But I also believe that you're going to perform live. Sometimes less is more. Think of the Ramones. But sometimes the order of the day is to play dress up, think Kiss, think the glam era, think David Bowie. So it's okay to play dress up and have theatrical stuff if you're Kiss and David Bowie and Sweet and Dimmu Borgir dressing up like Frost Giants. But if you're a progressive rock band, you can't do it. See, again, that hypocrisy. Performing live is a visual art as well as it is an auditory art. Yes doing and Blue Oyster Cult doing a laser light show, that kind of thing. They were in many ways the pioneers in the 70s who did that, 1973, 1974. Other bands with theatrical things going on in costumes, heavy backdrops, Sleep Token, Madonna, Prince, Metallica, and Justice for All. They built a statue of Lady Justice, and she collapses. That was amazing, and it worked so well with her falling while the song is going into its denouement. Judas Priest, with Rob Halford riding out during the Defenders of the Faith tour, saw that in '86. The Hellcat, and he comes, the claw lifts up, and he rides out from underneath that. So you're saying it's okay in metal and glam and heavy metal with Metallica and Priest, etc., Slipknot. You can play dress up, you can have a great stage, but if you're progressive rock, you can't do that. I'm just saying. Let's see. There was something else I wanted to say here regarding that. I guess not. So let's move on. The next comment comes from Lester Bangs. He and I'm trying to think of the not Kim Fowley. Lester Bangs. No, it's not Lester Bangs who said this. I beg your pardon. It's Robert Christgau who said that when he heard Genesis for the first time or thereabouts, that this music is quote unquote snooty. To me, Lester Bangs and Robert Christgau have always been they're malcontents masquerading as music critics, but calling Genesis or prog rock in general snooty is like calling Homer's The Odyssey snooty because you have a large scale setting, and it's thick, it's a really big, thick book. It's like calling even a thicker book than that would be Tolstoy's War and Peace. That's like calling that snooty because it's long. It's ridiculous. Lord of the Rings would be snooty then. So Robert Christgau is saying, well, you can only read short stories or novellas or works under 300 pages or something. Again, it's ridiculous to argue that it's snooty when you're the one who's being a snob because of your... it's one thing to dislike something, but to be belligerent towards something and call it snooty when you're actually the one you're the one who's actually snooty because of your contemptuous nature towards something. Again, I'm all in. If you don't like something, if you hate something, you hate something. I have no problem with something saying that, but you don't know the people in the band personally, so how do you know that they're snooty? It's really where and what I'm trying to get across here. If they are snooty, okay, then you're right, but we have no way of knowing that because they don't live rent-free inside of our heads. When you assume something is such, but no evidence, that makes you the one who is snooty, Robert. All right, next, this is 2 and 1, 7 and 8, showing off an obsessive dedication to technical skill. Having an obsessive dedication to technical skill. Well, let's deal with showing off. That's kind of back to the theatrical concept. You could argue the visual presentation, but really what critics of progressive rock are saying by showing off is because of that dedication or obsessive dedication to technical skill. Because you're really good at your craft doesn't mean you're showing off. Again, you're putting words in someone's head or someone's mouth. You're assuming that they're showing off because they have amazing skills. So if Jimmy Page or Blackmore or Miles Davis launches into a 10-minute solo, that's showing off. No, they're demonstrating their love for the craft, their musicianship. It's part of the music that they play, that they enjoy, that they love. You can do an album that's all 3-minute songs like the Ramones, give or take, and be showing off. Look how fast I can play I can play 19 songs on an album, and they're all 3 minutes really fast. That you could argue that's showing off. It may not be, but I'm just saying, just because you're dedicated to your skill doesn't mean you're showing off. You could be a lackluster player and be showing off. So it's just, ridiculous. Or arrogant or cocky would be a better word. So let's go back to the phrase obsessive dedication to technical skill. It's not obsessive. It's a passionate dedication. It's an enthusiastic dedication. It's a driven dedication. It's a committed dedication. It's an immersed dedication because it's all about the integrity of the craft. Okay? It's obsessive is a derogatory word for passionate, enthusiastic, driven, committed, and immersed. These critics who criticize, or perhaps you could argue, when they say they're showing off and they're obsessive, you could argue maybe that's, Psychology 101 suggests that these people are jealous because they're not as committed or enthusiastic or dedicated to the craft. Now, I would like to just throw a monkey wrench in all this and talk about the opposing argument that I totally get, but I also will talk about the pros and cons of that. So, as you know, I'm a big Swans fan, and Swans are very immersed and were inspired by so many different types of music, and some of that is punk and post-punk and new wave and that kind of thing, but also things like metal and industrial stuff like Godflesh. But in an interview, Michael Gira says, I don't know anything about the current music scene, and I never have really, but for me, punk rock's primary lesson is that you can make something happen with the most minimal of means. Of course, I agree with that. You don't have to be some virtuosic musician. You can organize sound, whether that's through bashing on a guitar inexpertly or a bass, or through using tape loops. He then says, I have never gotten, quote, better at guitar. It's just a piece of wood with some wires on it that I use to make sounds so I can sing to it. He continues, it just takes, well, first of all, it takes talent, but it also takes vision and commitment. And that's always been my way of approaching music. I have never gotten, quote, better at guitar. Again, repeating himself, it's just a piece of wood, etc. And then he goes on to say, if you're a musician, you can make something happen with the most minimal of means. He repeats himself. And then he talks about, let's see, about being an in-your-face type singer. So anything else was just me repeating myself here, or repeating what Gira said. So yeah, you don't have to be the most technical virtuoso to be in a band. I'm not denying that whatsoever. As I said, I'm a huge Swans fan, but Gira and Swans, while having a minimalist approach, one of the things that I love about them is while having a minimalist approach, they have very long songs as a big part of their catalog. So it has a progressive feel to it, despite the fact that, you may not have, Gira says he's not, a virtuoso type guitar player, but you have elements of prog in their music because you have lengthy, epic length tracks. You have time signature changes. You have, a lot of art, despite the fact that it's based in a lot of punk and post-punk and other things. You have very artsy music nonetheless, despite its minimalist approach. Where you have, say, the Ramones, you don't have very artsy, progressive type tendencies, if at all, because it's just, in your face, balls to the wall, fast as you can, most often, and very minimalistic. So there you have it for showing off an obsessive dedication to technical skill. And while Michael Gira may not be the most technically advanced musician, he is dedicated to the skill that he does have. And I wouldn't call it obsessive. It's passionate, enthusiastic, driven, committed, immersed. So number 9 next is concept albums are pretentious. Now let's talk about the elements that make up a concept album. Usually it's a double or triple album or CD You have multiple chapters within a story, so the overall product being produced is a story. You have ideas grand in execution. You have some long instrumental passages. You have music motifs throughout the album. It could be adopted into a play, a musical, or film. You have at least one 7 or 8 minute plus long song. You have longer songs linked by shorter joining tracks to move the story along. You have lots of musical and lyrical complexity and great interplay between musicians. And sometimes it often ends where the album began. It comes full circle. Think Seventh Son of a Seventh Son from Iron Maiden, where you get back to the acoustic guitar and Bruce Dickinson singing the last line, which was the first line, and Jethro Tull's Thick as a Brick ends the way it began. And there's so many other examples of that. But the argument that concept albums are pretentious, I find hypocritical as well, because I know there have to be people out there who dislike progressive rock, but they like movies. Movies are stories. Concept albums are stories. So are movies. I'm sure there are people who like opera who don't like progressive rock. Those are stories. The Twilight of the Gods in Norse mythology. I'm sure there are people who don't like progressive rock but like to go see a Shakespeare play or a play. It doesn't have to be Shakespearean. That's a story, grand in execution and what have you. Ballet, very similar. TV shows, TV series, miniseries that you stream, etc. Books are a great example of art that are stories. Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, The Hunger Games. We could go on and on. So the hypocrisy there is palpable. And to drive the point even further is, I'm sure there are people who cannot stand progressive rock because of the concept albums are pretentious, but you have Who's Tommy, you have Who's Quadrophenia. Those are progressive. They may not be progressive rock, but they're progressive. They're concept albums. You have Live at Leeds, the double version of that, which has most of Tommy, if not all of Tommy, like Live at Hull in its entirety. You have the Pretty Things, SF Sorrow, a concept album. And if we're going to talk about heavy metal for a minute, I'm sure there are a lot of people who like heavy metal but don't like progressive rock. Queensryche's Operation Mindcrime and Operation Life Crime is a concept piece. There are others, of course. And finally, to drive the point home with respect to that hypocrisy, the pop band or pop punk band My Chemical Romance has a concept album called 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge, which I think is awesome. And they're essentially have the makings of a punk band. You don't have a lot of long songs, but it's a concept piece. So again, I'm sure there are a lot of people who like this album by My Chemical Romance, but they don't like progressive rock, and yet it's a concept album. So again, pointing out a lot of the hypocrisy that you have here for fans of music who don't like progressive rock. Again, I'm not saying that you must like progressive rock and, you're an idiot. No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying you're wrong, because, again, I believe that taste in music is 100% subjective, but you're not going to like what you like. I get that. We're going to like the things that we like, and I'm not questioning or saying you're wrong for not liking progressive rock, but what gets me is the hypocrisy that a lot of the elements, as I've pointed out here today, okay, long solos, overlong albums, think, the Stones' Exile on Main Street, I don't think I mentioned that, fantasy lyrics, grandiose stage sets, costumes, showing off or obsessive dedication, concept albums. You find a lot of these elements outside of progressive rock. So again, I question, my premise is, it's okay if it's in books, it's okay if it's in movies, it's okay if it's in TV, it's okay if it's in other genres of rock, in the big umbrella of rock, but it's not okay if it's progressive music. That's why I made this video. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye now.